So in the last video, we did the basic project setup. Now let us move forward, and in this video, we will do the basic app setup with the help of Express, and we will add one controller. And here we will see the need of dependency injection. What is the need of dependency injection, where it is used, and what tools we have to help us in doing the dependency injection. So let us start. So in last video, this is where we have left. We added a index.ts and we added a console log statement here. Now what we will do, we will add a app.ts, and in that app.ts we will set up our Express application, right? So I'll say new file and I will say app.ts. Okay, and since this is going to be heavily object oriented, so the app will obviously be a class, right? So I'll say export class app. Okay, and what this will have, this will have one property called private app. Okay, and what will be the type of this one? This will be of type application coming from Express, right? So this is going to be an Express application, right? And I will add a constructor. Okay, and in this constructor I will say this dot app equals to our Express application, right? And what we will do, we will import it here. So it will say Express, right? Then here what I will do, I'll add a start method. Okay, so when somebody calls this start method, it will start listening on a particular port, right? So I'll say public start. Okay, now first thing is I want to initialize a port. Okay, so for now I'm just hard coding it. Okay, so I'll say const port equals to 8000. Okay, so it will listen on port 8000. For now it is hard coded. Later we'll see how we can get it from different config sources. So I will say this dot app dot listen. Okay, where it will listen, it will listen on the port, and it will have a callback function. And in this callback function I'll add a simple console log, okay, which will print a simple message, server is running on port, and we will give the port number. Okay, so port, right? Now here in index.ts, what I will do, I'll remove this. So here what I will do, I'll say class main. Okay, and here we'll have a private property called app. Okay, and this will be of type app coming from our /app.ts, right? This one, this is the type that I am assigning here, right? And I will add a constructor. Okay, and in this constructor I'll say this dot app equals to new app, right? And here what I will do, this dot app dot start, right? So this is the method that we have added, right? So this is pretty much going to be our main class. And what I can do, I'll say simply new main. Okay, so what this will do, this will create a new instance, right? When this instance is created, this constructor will be called, right? When this constructor is called, this start method will be invoked, right? So when I go inside this start method, what will happen, it will start listening on a particular port, right? So I will save this one and I will open the terminal, and it says server is running on port 8000, right? This is what we were trying to do. Now if you see, I'm getting one squiggly error here. Okay, cannot find module, right? So if you see, we are not getting any syntax error on the terminal, right? That means this syntax is correct. For some reason VS Code is not able to pick this up, right? So what I will say, I'll open this one and I will say developer reload window. See, when I do a reload window, this error is gone, right? If I save this one, everything is working, right? There was no problem, just a VS Code issue. Okay, so our Express app setup is completed. Now what we will do with this Express setup, right? We need a controller, right? So let us add a controller. And how we will add controllers? So I will create a folder called books. So books is one module. Okay, we can have multiple modules, right? So first let me start with the book module. Okay, inside this we'll add all the entities that are related to book. Okay, so first entity is of course our controller. So I will say book.controller.ts, right? So this is going to be the convention. File name dot purpose name dot ts, right? So we might add service, we might add middlewares and so many things, right? So book.controller.ts. Okay, and what is this going to be? This is obviously going to be a class, right? So export class, I'll say book controller, right? Now what this will have, this will have a route instance, right? So I'll say private router of type router, and this router will come from Express, right? And I will say constructor this dot router equals to the router function. Okay, so this is how we do basic Express setup, right? We have routers. Okay, that router will have functions respective to the get and post and delete method, right? And that router is attached to the app as a middleware app.use, right? So we will see that flow. Now here what I will do, I'll add some hard-coded book information. Okay, so this is an array. It has title, description, some ISBN information, price, and pages. Okay, so these are all made up data. Okay, so like that I have few instances of books. Okay, so temporarily I'll use this as a say database kind of thing. Okay, we'll add database later, but this is going to be our data source for now. Okay, so what do we need? We will start very simple. Okay, we will add just two methods. One is get all and one is get by id. Okay, so I'll say get all books. Okay, and what this will take, this will take a request and a response, right? This is because this is going to be express function, right? So this request is going to type request and it will come from express. Okay, and this response is going to be of type response, and this will also come from express. Okay, not from any other source, it should come from express, right? And here what I will do, I'll say res dot status of 200. Okay, dot json, and what I'll send the books instance, right? Similarly, what I can do, get book by id, and it will be same request of type request and response of type response, right? And here what I have to do, I have to get the book id, right? So the book id that I'm trying to access, right? So it will be const, okay, book id equals to request dot params dot id, right? So this id is the query params, right? I'll show you how we can fetch this one, right? Now the thing is, these are index, right? 0 1 2 array index, right? And query param will come as string, right? So we have to parse it, right? So I will add this error handling. Okay, and I will say parse int. Okay, parse int, and I'll add a fallback value of 0. Okay, so see here, this is string 0, right? Not a number 0, because I'm doing parse int on this, right? So if this at all happens, this 0 will be parsed to integer and id will be 0, right? Of course, this is not the very robust way of error handling, and I'm not doing error handling as of now. I'll show it in the later videos, but for now the very basic implementation I'm trying to show here. Okay, then I'll say res dot status of obviously 200, and as I said, no error handling here. This is very simple implementation. We will do all the error handling later, right? And json, what will be the json value? It will have books and the book id, the index, right? And I will do one thing, I will add a private access modifier to this one, right? So private and private, because I don't want this value to be exposed outside, right? I'll add a proper route to access invoke these functions, right? Now what do we need? See, the functions are there, but it should be attached to the router, right? Otherwise this won't work, right? So I will add one more private method. Okay, I'll call it as initialize routes. Okay, and here what I will do, I will say this dot router dot get, right? This is going to be a get method on which path? On root path of a particular URL, something similar to this one. So we will have localhost, okay, then port 8000, then slash books slash this much. Okay, so this is the root path, right? And say for example, if I add 3, so this will be the params value, right? Query param. So this is going to be the param value for this root path slash books, right? So where we will add this books, I'll show you later. But for now, what we are doing, we are adding this path, right, in the router function. So here on the root path of books router, which I'll show you later where to add, what I can say, this dot get all books dot bind to this function, this particular class. Okay, because this will be running on different context, right? When we are going to use dependency injection framework, this is not always going to run on this book controller. So I'm tightly coupling it with the book controller instance. Okay, and I will also do this dot router dot get. Okay, this will be slash colon id, right? And it will be this dot get books by id dot bind, and it is binding to this particular instance of the class, right? So this colon id is what I'm parsing here, right? Okay, great. And what I should do with this one, I should call this one, so this dot initialize routes. Perfect. So what we have done, we have added few methods, okay, and we have tied them to a particular http methods, to a particular http method, right? To get, for now it is get, but eventually we will add post and put and delete and everything, right? But this is just a starting point. Great. So now let us come to our app. Okay, so what we will do, we will add a private variable called book controller, which is going to be of type book controller, right? Book controller. And here what I can do, this dot book controller equals to new book controller. Okay, one more caution here. What I'm saying, this is not the correct way. Okay, I'll fix it very soon. Okay, but this is not the correct way, but just to make the app running, I'm doing this. Okay, now the controller, I'm able to get an instance of this controller, right? Now what I'm going to do with this controller, so let me create a method. Okay, private, I'll say initialize controllers. Okay, now what I'll do here, I'll say this dot app dot use. Okay, use on what? On books, the path. What I have to use, this dot book controller dot router. And here if you see, I'm getting squiggly. Okay, so here it should be public because I'm going to use this outside, right? So this dot book controller dot router is attached to slash books root path. Okay, and if you go to router, it has two http verbs or two get verbs. One is on the root and one is root slash a particular value, right? So I will save all of this one. Now once we have added this function, what we can do, this dot initialize controller, we will call it in the constructor, right? So now what will happen, we don't have to do anything on the index.ts. When we instantiate this new app, what will happen, it will create an express instance. Okay, it will create the book instance and it will initialize the controllers, right? So that means these paths will be attached. After that we are doing start, so it will start listening on the servers. Now let us check the console and see if we have any errors. We don't have any errors, right? So now let me open postman and we try to send a request. Okay, so this is on the local host. Okay, and on slash books. Okay, the root path. Okay, so let me send the request, right? So what we are getting all the books, right? We are getting all the 5 books that we have added, the constant that we have added, right? Now let us say book 1. Okay, so if we send this one, we'll get the book value, right? So book 1, that means the index 1. Okay, so it says whisperers of the banyan tree. So let me open our code, and if we see here the 0th index and the first index, right? So the whisperers of the banyan tree, so we are getting this particular value, right? Now let me come here and discuss about this statement. Okay, this is not the correct way. Why? Because a class should not instantiate its own dependency. Okay, that is the rule. Okay, otherwise this particular class, this app class, is tightly coupled with book controller instance, this book controller class. Okay, and this is not something what we want. We don't want tight coupling. Okay, so this is not the correct way to do it. Okay, now if this is not the correct way, then what is the correct way? Okay, now we have to understand one concept, that is the dependency. So what is the dependency? This app class is dependent on this book controller, right? Similarly, this main class is dependent on this app instance or this app class, right? So this is the dependency. So here, if we don't want to create this kind of dependency directly within the class, then what is the solution? The solution is the dependency should be injected through the constructor, right? So we should do it like this. So it should take a book controller, which is also going to be of type book controller, and instead of instantiating a new instance, it should be assigned to the instance in the class. Okay, so when we do this, what will happen? This new app, okay, we are passing it as a constructor, right? If you see here, we are passing it as constructor argument, right? And where we are calling this app, we are calling this app here, right? So here we should pass the new book controller, right? Then only it will work, right? Through the dependency injection. Okay, so if I save this one, okay, so this is first part. Okay, now let me take one example here. Okay, so this book controller, okay, let us create a class. Okay, I'll say export class logger. Okay, so it has two methods. Okay, one is log, okay, and one is error. Okay, I'm not giving the implementation because this is just some explanation. Okay, now this book controller say is dependent on this logger, right? So how it will be dependent? So we'll say private logger of type logger, right? And on the constructor I should pass, right? That's what we have identified. So it will take a logger instance, and here what I should do, this dot logger equals to logger, right? And then I can use it wherever I want, right? So I can say this dot logger dot log or error, whatever I want, right? So this is just for the explanation. Okay. Now what has happened here? See, we are getting one more error again here, right? Why? Because our book controller is now expecting a log instance to be passed, right? So what I have to do, I have to come here and I have to say new logger, right? Then only it will be fixed. Now let us say, for example, this logger class, okay, it is again dependent on another class, say config class, right? I'm not doing any implementation. Okay, so let us say private config. Okay, it is expecting of type config, and in the constructor I have to pass the config value, which of course has to be type config, right? And this dot config equals to config, right? Now again what happened? See, this guy again broke. Why? Because again it is expecting one more dependency, new config, right? So now you are able to see the problem. Imagine having 50 such controllers and you want to add one dependency and you have to update it in many places, right? This is one place. You might have used it in any other place, right? And in real world app you might have 50, 60, even 100 controllers, right? So passing value through the constructor is correct, okay, but every time I update a dependency I have to come and update the source also, right? And again it will be confusing, right? This is just a simple code, but in big code base it won't be that easy to find that controller and add the dependencies, right? So this is where dependency injection framework comes into picture. What they will do, they will expose a container, okay, and in that container we'll have instance of a particular class along with its dependency, right? I have already made a video in my TypeScript section. I'll put a link in the description or in the I button. Feel free to check that one. There we discussed in detail the problem of dependency injection and we created our own dependency injection container, small container, mini container, okay? But now we need something more production ready, right? So for that we already have added this type di, right? So this is the dependency injection framework. We are going to use this one and we'll see if we can solve this problem. Of course we can solve this problem, right? So here what I will do, I'll say import reflect metadata, right? This is needed from now on. Now, so I talked about a dependency injection container, right? So what that container will have, it will have the instance of a particular class along with its dependency. But how that particular class will go into that container? If I want to add a class to a container, see, all I have to do is I have to add a decorator, call it a service, okay, service. And this service is coming from this type di npm package. As soon as I do this, my container will have an instance of this config along with all its dependency. Okay, here it doesn't have dependency, that's fine. Similarly, here also I can do a service. Okay, now the dependency injection container will see, okay, it has a dependency of config, right? It will check the config in its container and it will find because we have added it in the dependency container, right, through this service. So it will create an instance of this logger along with this config, so we don't have to inject it anywhere. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'll add a service here also, right? As soon as I add service, it will become part of the dependency injection framework, right? So as soon as I add the service, I can access it without passing it directly in the controller from here, right? I'll show you. So here also I will add a service, and this will come from type di. Now if you see this app, okay, is part of container and it has a dependency called book controller, right? So what the type di will do, it will create instance of this app along with this dependency. And when this is creating this book controller, it will see that it has a log dependency. So it will create an instance of book controller which has log as its dependency, right? So it will manage the dependency chain for me. Okay. Now what I have to do, I can remove this one. Okay. If I simply remove this one, of course it will throw error. Now, what we have to keep in mind is when we are working with the dependency injection framework, we do not use this new app or new method. Okay, we do not use the new instantiation. We do not use the new keyword to do the instantiation. Okay, then how we will do the instantiation? We will say container dot get app. See, now when I do this, I'll get an app, okay, which has this book controller already injected into it, and this book controller has already logger injected into it, and this logger has already config injected into it. Okay, because I have added service everywhere, all of these are part of my dependency injection framework. Right now when I save this one, it will work. Okay, no errors. Earlier it was showing error, right? Constructor config was not provided and everything. If you see, there are a lot of errors, right? Book controller was not provided. Okay, so now it is working. Okay, and let me run a controller, right? It will work. So to get the instance of a class, you can use container.get. This should be the starting point. Once you do this, all its dependency will be already available to you, right? What else I can do? See, here I am doing new app. Why this is okay? Because this app main class doesn't have any dependency, right? Just for example, okay, what I can do, I can add it also in the container by adding a service method, service decorator, right? So I'll say quick fix and update import from type di, right? Now here what I can do, I can say app of type app, okay, and instead of container dot get, what I can do, I can say app, right? Assign the value. Now it is throwing error. Okay, so what is the solution? I'll say container dot get main, right? So this is the replacement of new main or any new instantiation or instantiation using the new keyword, right? So now when I do this, okay, again it will start working, right? So server is running on a particular port, okay, and if I run the postman, of course I can get all the value, right? All the value we can see, right? So this is the power of dependency injection, right? So you create chain of dependency. So main is dependent on app, right? App is dependent on book controller, and it might not only depend on book controller, but it might depend on hundreds of controllers, right? As I said before, real world application doesn't have one controller, right? And this book controller might be dependent on multiple classes, right? Like logger class. So I hope you got the point, right? So now what I'll do, I'll remove all of this. All of this means this logger and config, because for now this is not part of our current implementation. I just added it to just give a demo, right? So I'll remove this logger, and this logger also I'll remove. This logger also I'll remove. Okay, and if I have anything here, I'll remove all this dependency. Book controller also I don't need here, right? So I'll remove all of this. Okay, and I'll save this one. Let me check once. See if server is running on port 8000, and I will run this once. Okay, so everything is working perfectly, right? Great. So this is where I am ending this video. In the next video, we will see how we can enhance the controller by adding decorators to that, so that we don't have to do the manual controller initialization in our app class. And if you have liked this video, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content I bring on this channel on a daily basis. And I'll see you in the next video.